Thanks, Damon, for asking me about the Class Act. I'd like to start by taking a little bit of a broad view of programs like the Class Act because we've had many of them over our history. We've had a lot of diligent efforts from the beginning of Social Security, for example, to estimate the impact of Social Security on our country, both in terms of its impact of benefits and what it would cost. And we have continually found that those have been underestimated. They were underestimated up front. Subsequently, the environment changed, which caused the cost to go up. The benefits were increased, caused the cost to go up. And our politicians obviously are unwilling and unable to deal with that type of situation after it occurs. So what we do is we keep those costs, those unfunded liabilities, off ledger so that they don't even show up when people talk about our debt. And we have now $140 trillion of off-balance sheet liabilities, debt of that nature that we don't even talk about. So then what we do is we change the nature of the programs. What starts out as an insurance program like the Class Act is supposed to be, gets turned into a non-insurance program where it's a transfer, somehow making it be like a tax on the more wealthy to help the less affluent because they can't afford to pay for it and continue it in the way that it was originally set up. And of course, the public psyche is affected. They think they have benefits, etc. They're inured to some of their risks because they think somehow the government will take care of them. This is not necessarily just related to benefit programs of that type. If you think of any of the things that the government has taken over that needs to be on a fiscally sound basis, it's not just Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, but think of the post office, think of Amtrak, think of Fannie Mae, think of Granny Mae. All of those items have ended up with fiscal problems because the government has either squeezed them to do things that they couldn't do in a sound financial fashion or has been unwilling to deal with the cost structure. Now, as regards the Class Act, a group of extremely highly respected and knowledgeable long-term care insurance actuaries priced it on behalf of the American Academy of Actuaries. I say on behalf of, at the request of, as a committee of the American Academy of Actuaries. And they concluded that the Class Act, and by the way, I may not be using the most current version of the Class Act because these things can change, but the principles I'm describing have certainly been present throughout a whole series of 4 years worth of versions of the Class Act. So the most recent one probably is consistent in principle, even if the numbers may be a little different. The actuaries concluded in a recent study that the Class Act fund would become insolvent in the year 2021 as proposed. And they concluded that there would have to be a $160 a month benefit premium, $160 a month premium for a $5 per day benefit. Now, I wasn't able to go through and dig through their numbers, but from what I read in their report, I have every reason to believe that they did a sound analysis. Obviously, it could cost more because no one can predict what the future is going to be. But the key question is, what question were they asked? What question were they answering? They were answering a question of how much money would have to be charged for premiums for the Class Act so that those premiums, if retained by the government 100%, would be sufficient to pay the claims that would come from the Class Act over a 75-year period of time. Okay. Why do you use a 75-year period of time? Because obviously the future is unpredictable. The problem with using a 75-year period of time is that you're cutting off the tail of the distribution. All of these programs collect their premiums up front and don't get benefits paid up front. The benefits are paid later on as we go. So anytime you stop the analysis, you've got a more optimistic conclusion than if you let the analysis go further. To give you an idea, when the OASDI report comes out each year on our Social Security fund, the 75-year period is less than 1/3 of the deficit if you take it out and let the tail run out. So if we were to let the tail run out on Class Act, my guess is it would be even more back-ended than Social Security, so it would clearly be more than 3 times the deficit that we might have over a 75-year horizon. They also, interestingly enough, and this may have changed, but they said premiums could be raised if a 20-year projection indicated that at least 40% of the funds would be going out each year for the full 20 years. That's way too late to allow a premium increase to occur. By that point in time, the fund would run dry in a short period of time, even with a premium increase. And the premium increase was limited to a maximum of 50% at any one time, and never could more than double. And if anybody was retired and had paid in over 20 years, they couldn't have a rate increase at all. So you're already seeing the political process working, where things are going to go up and costs are going to go underwater, but they're not going to allow it to be fixed. And that's the problems we have right now. There's another cost factor in there as well. Just to use Missouri as an example, all the states have, for Medicaid recipients on long-term care, a personal needs allowance, and it's pretty typical in Missouri. It's $30 a month plus whatever the cost is of your acute health care coverage. Under the Class Act, in addition to that, people could keep 5% of their Class Act benefits. So if they had two ADLs, if they needed help with two activities of daily living, the current $30 a month in Missouri would increase to $142 a month. And the current, if they needed help with four activities of daily living, the current $30 a month would increase to $265 a month. So obviously there's costs involved there that could be significant that I don't think were reflected. This bill will kill the industry. As many people know, it's been hard to sell long-term care insurance historically. It's been hard to convince the public that they aren't or won't be covered by the government. Obviously, this would make it worse. People would think that they have full coverage even though they only have partial coverage under the Class Act. People will think they're covered even if they're not participating in the Class Act. They'll unenroll and still think that they've got coverage. They'll have expectations that even though the benefits are small, that they'll be larger by the time I need them. So what you have is an extremely difficult sale will become more difficult, and if you can make a sale, all you could make a sale would be of a supplemental coverage, which means that the premium would be lower, which means that you couldn't get any commission to satisfy your work effort. So there'd be, who in their mind would want to do this. I can't imagine it. I believe after having been dedicated to this business for 14 years, I'd be out, actually 15 years now, I'd just be out of business if this were to pass. Some people don't think that's the case, either because they haven't thought this through or because they figure that they'll be able to insure people for less. And somehow they think they're going to go into these places and insure these people for less because they're going to suck out the married people who are preferred rate candidates.